right. Welcome to the weekend eve. And I am here with Coach 24, Darwin Penny, my brother with another mother, and the producer, Mr. DJ Scatter, George Walker. I am Brian Kress, the awesome voice, and we are Any Given Sunday. And I'm going to have to turn my voice down, otherwise I'm going to keep hearing myself. So anyway, so how are you doing today, sir?
It is a great day. I'm excited because the last time I saw you, it was very, very cold. And so we are back to normal weather here in Kansas City again.
Yes. And how are you doing, Mr. DJ Scatter?
Hey, I'm doing super fantastic today, just fine.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, we were golfing out at Winter Stone, which is off 291 in Kentucky, and there was a gentleman out there saying, "Are you guys crazy or are you just dedicated?" Well, we realized that, one, I am crazy, and two, you are crazier, Coach 24, because you followed me.
Absolutely. I was like, it had nothing. I could say I'm dedicated to my friendship to my brother, but I was crazy to be out there playing in that cold weather.
I'm telling you what, yeah, I was kind of like, yeah, we probably could have skipped it, but no, we had to enjoy it. And you shot pretty decent, and I shot horrible. I shot 120. My goodness, I'm telling you, I got to get my game going. Anyway, we're going to, and right now I am wearing my Padres jersey because the Padres are in the National League Championship Series. They are deadlocked 1-1 after last night. Philadelphia had taken the first game. 2 home runs was all it was, but I'm telling you what, Wheeler for the Phillies just pitched an amazing game. 7 innings, 1 hit ball, and Padres just couldn't hit the ball. Second game, the Phillies were up 4-0, and I'm thinking, no, I do not want this. Philadelphia is 27-2 in the playoffs when they are up 4 runs in a playoff game. So it was easily, it could have been 28-2, but the Padres came back, roared back. Soto finally showed up. Machado finally showed up. And with that, they eked out a 8-5 victory and evened it up.
Well, this is what I talk about in the new age of baseball. The analytic statistics and the 3-ring binder said take the pitcher out. In the old days, a pitcher going as strong as he would, they would have left him in there and allowed him to go until he couldn't go anymore. They bring in the bullpen. The bullpen doesn't do its job. The guy couldn't find the plate. He was walking guys. He was late. Even when he finally got out of the inning, I thought San Diego's hitters were being a little bit overly aggressive then. When a guy's struggling, the rule of thumb for us was always let's make him throw an extra pitch because it doesn't take much for a guy to get in his head. And then certainly they had the big bats with Machado coming up and making a huge impact and being able to just give life to that. Back to game 1, Hugh Darvish threw well, giving up only 2 runs in 7 innings, but it wasn't enough. The Phillies pitcher certainly was stellar in the opening game of this series. I think it's going to be a series that goes all 7 games. You see 2 teams that are pretty evenly matched, but as I was saying, San Diego is all in. They made great moves at the trade deadline and prior to with bringing over Soto. A little-known acquisition for most people is them bringing Josh Bell over. That was huge to get another power-hitting, switch-hitting guy in the lineup, especially this year with the advent of both leagues adopting the DH, having that extra bat meant the pitcher not having a hit, but it also gave you a chance to give your outfielders a day of rest from being out in the field where they could, take one of those days to be a DH. And I think in the long season, it helps some of those guys be more productive in the postseason. And I think you're seeing that, especially with even with the Phillies with Bryce Harper. He's been battling a lot of injuries all this year, but he has really turned it up in the playoffs, hitting over 400 with about 5 home runs.
Yep, absolutely, because he hit home run in the first game, and then Shorebird crushed the shot, but he was batting 050. So, I mean, hopefully we don't wake up the sleeping bear in him. But anyway, so it is 1-1. The Padres are going back to Philly and taking care of them. Talking about the Philly fans, though, you know, a lot of people say that the Philly fans are very dedicated. I really have a problem with Philly fan, especially in the series with Atlanta and the way they acted towards the team once they won the playoff game with Atlanta. So I just hopefully we'll worry more about the game and not about the fans.
Absolutely. Philly fans have always been very rambunctious, whether it was football, baseball, basketball. They're very, very passionate fans. You know, these are the same people that booed and threw snowballs at Santa Claus back in the 70s. So,
and cheered Michael Irvin when he was carried off the field.
Absolutely. So I don't think it's anything any different. And so this is something that we've just always known with that Philly. They're very, very rowdy, very rambunctious in how they cheer their team. And they have been equally as critical of their own team over the years, right? They don't just jump on the opposing team. They've been critical of their own players, and I think it's just part of their persona and who they are. You know, I always tell people, if you want to see the best fans when it comes to baseball, certainly there are baseball towns. I think Kansas City is a baseball town. St. Louis is a baseball town. But if you want to see who I believe are the best baseball fans are Cub fans. Cub fans for years watched day baseball before they ever had lights at Wrigley. It doesn't matter. The Cubs had gone years without winning a World Series. In 2016, they finally won a World Series for the first time since basically the curse of the GOAT, you know, all the way back to the Babe Ruth days.
Yep.
And so, but they always have a full stadium. They always sell out. There have been many other places that I've been and lived, and people would, you know, when the team's well, we got a full stadium. When the team's not doing as well, it's not a full stadium, you know, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. Even right now, you know, we're having sparse crowds here in Kansas City because our team is not where they were in 2014 and 15 and even the 16 and 17 years where we were, you know, competitive up until the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. And so, you know, it's a challenge to our own fans to be consistent at going out, and everybody wants to see a winning product, but true fans stick behind their team. And that's why I say about Cub fans, it doesn't matter what place they're in. Those fans are still there.
No, and they were one of the first ones with the TV contracts, them and the Atlanta Braves. And so you had the TV, so everybody's watching it, but they still showed up.
Still show up.
You know, in Kansas City, I'm afraid that if they're not winning, they'll sit at home and watch it, then go to the game. I try to make it out to as many games as possible. I don't go a lot, just based on my availability, but still, either way, I still like to go out there. I still enjoy the game. Even when the team is not playing very well, it's a great atmosphere. So,
absolutely. Kansas City, Kauffman Stadium is still, in my opinion, one of the beautiful stadiums in all of baseball. It's a great venue. The highway in the background, Crown Vision. Nobody else has a stadium jumbotron like Crown Vision. You know, it was way ahead of its time. It still is. The fountains, and it's one of my concerns with us potentially building a new stadium is that we'll lose that beautiful edifice that we have here in Kansas City. And you know, and I've been fortunate to have that conversation with Mr. Sherman one time. I said, "Is there any way that if you do secure a new stadium, can we figure out a way to have the fountains? That's just part of the beauty of Kauffman Stadium.
Yeah, it would be great if they could just lift up the stadium and just move it somewhere. I mean, that would be okay, but if they can at least architect it in the same vision as Kauffman Stadium, then that won't be a bad thing.
Yep.
But I already know that downtown is going to happen. I know a lot of people are not liking it, but it's the today move.
It is. It's today move. Most baseball and basketball franchises are down in town, and the football franchises have moved just on the outskirts of town. In a lot of places where they could create a whole complex of where they can train. They can also have shopping and create their own mall. If you've ever been to Frisco, where the Cowboys have created their own little city, so to speak, where their training facility is, and in Foxborough, where the Patriots are, they've done the same thing. They've created their own little entity out there, and so that's where it is. But baseball and basketball have created opportunities to get people downtown in the respective cities. As a longtime resident of Houston, I watched when all of the major sports teams moved into downtown. And so it's something that's on the horizon. I do think it's something to be excited about. But like you said, hopefully they can take a little piece of Kauffman down there, and you don't lose that somehow. Like you say, pack up Crown Vision and the fountains. And for me, I'd be good.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree with you. So we talked about the National League Championship Series. Let's talk about the American League. The Yankees took care of Cleveland by hitting the long ball. Last night, Houston long balled the New York Yankees. And so I can't remember the guys because I was watching the game and I couldn't remember who it was because I was bowling. But, it was 1-1. Verlander pitched an amazing game. The Yankee pitcher pitched an amazing game. And then the bullpen gave it up. But Houston ended up hitting like 2 or 3 home runs and ended up with a 4-2 victory.
Absolutely. It was a great game. Verlander last night showed you why they went out and got him a few years back, to have that anchor, that ace, that veteran who's been in postseason play, and he looked like that. He had a great second half of the season and started to look like his old self. He's advanced in age now at about 35 years old. 39 years old, right? And so here he is. He's going out and he's doing it. Gurriel, big homer for him last night, and so and McCormick, and so the Astros go out there. Jeremy Pena hits a home run, and so those were all big blows to the team that lives by the home run, right? The Yankees live by the home run. I think there are going to be a lot of home runs hit in this series because both of the ballparks are conducive to home runs being hit. The short Crawford boxes in Houston, and then certainly the new Yankee Stadium. The ball carries out there pretty well, even though it's a little bit, colder time of the year when you're going to play there. I want to see how the cold weather in New York affects the players in Houston, because they're playing in a comfortable climate control with the roof on. They've never played a playoff game in Houston with the roof open.
Right.
And so here's the opportunity for the Yankees to have a little bit of a home field advantage if that cool front stays in New York as it is. And so how will those Astro players respond to that when it's a little bit nippy in New York? And the other thing is because of the Yankees Cleveland series being pushed back a few days because of weather and going all 5 games, they didn't really get any rest. They had to leave New York, fly all the way to Houston, play. Now they're going to play back-to-back days in Houston, then get back on a plane and go back to New York. And so where Houston had an opportunity to rest. And so New York has to figure out a way to steal one of these games in Houston to give themselves a chance to be successful once they go back to New York, I believe.
So saying that, do you think the Yankees can beat the Astros?
Can they beat the Astros? Yes. Right now, though, I would give the edge to the Astros. One, they have the home field advantage. Two, I think right now Their depth from the bench standpoint and in the bullpen is a little bit better than the Yankees. The question is, can they keep the Yankee big bats? Can they keep Judge, Giancarlo, Rizzo? Can they keep those guys under control and not let one of those guys get real hot, or two? Right now, Judge is struggling, but Giancarlo's swinging a pretty good bat, and then maybe the home run last night gets Rizzo going. But they're going to have to get some guys in the other part of the lineup to come and step up big and be the answer to that. Houston is getting production really from top to bottom, and their best guy, Altuve, hadn't gotten hot yet.
Right, absolutely. And this, you talk about football being a team sport. But baseball, when it is the playoff time, you can't just – you had George Brett in the 80s, but still you had great pitching. You had great you had a great bench. And so, as you said, Houston has the advantage there, and it is for the Yankees to try to take it from them. So because I've got the Astros – saying that, I would like to see the Yankees only for the fact that I want the Padres, and I'm picking the Padres automatically, but I would love the Padres to play the Yankees so they can get back when they lost to them in the '98 World Series. I still think about that. That was the last World Series Tony Gwynn was in, and in the first game they had the three outfielders throw out the first pitch. Unfortunately, Tony Gwynn has passed away, so he couldn't. So Tony Gwynn Jr. threw for him, and then Steve Finley and Greg Vaughn. So for that point, I'd like to see the Padres and the Yankees and have the Padres win. But I believe it's going to be the Astros, because as much as I love my Padres, and I love them as much as I love the Royals, I still have a feeling for Dusty Baker. Absolutely. A lot of people are still hating on the Astros for what they did, but Dusty Baker was not the manager at that time. So, I'm still, caught up in between, what they did and Dusty Baker being a class act. So with that,
here's what we know about that: we can't change it.
Nope.
So at some point in time, people need to let it go. And I really think the only people that are holding on to it are the Yankee fans.
Yeah.
Right? They're holding on to it. And some of the commentators who have Yankee ties and continue to bring that up, it is what it is. It happened, and we've moved on. And here Dusty is doing his job as a manager. He's been successful everywhere that he's been. He won a pennant in San Francisco with the Giants. He had a successful record in Chicago. He had a successful run in Cincinnati, successful run in the Nationals, really to get them to the place as to where they are now as a franchise a couple of years ago.
Right.
When they won the World Series. I mean, a lot of that was the influence that Dusty had on them in 2016 and 17. Both of those years they won over 95 games, and now he's gone into Houston. He's settled that franchise down, brought them through the controversy, of what happened back in 2017, and they won 95 games last year, and then they won 106 games this year.
Absolutely.
Right,
so, yep. So, like I said, I've got the Padres. But if the Padres lose to anybody, I would rather to Houston and Dusty Baker. With that, 816-599-6893 is the phone number. If you guys are listening and you guys want to call in and speak your piece, then please do so, and we will definitely take your guys' calls in. So again, 816-599-6893 is the phone number. Now we've got New Orleans going to Arizona and playing the Cardinals, 2-4 teams that are not playing very well, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But last week we had a couple of great games. Well, we had a lot of great games, but the two games was the Chiefs and Buffalo, and Philadelphia and Dallas. So I'm going to bring up Dallas and Philadelphia first. And in that game, Sunday morning when I did my predictions, I said that Philadelphia had a great offensive line. Dallas has a great defensive line. Whichever team performed better, then that team was going to win. And so Philadelphia did win that. Micah Parsons did play great, but he was playing virtually by himself.
Well, I thought it was a good game. I think it was a tale of games. There was a time in the early third quarter and then early fourth quarter where Dallas's defensive line started to assert itself. You had guys like Durant, Armstrong. Everybody's looking for Parsons to make all the big splash. But in the end, they wind up with 3 quarterback sacks, and it's pretty much all that you could ask, especially with somebody as elusive as Jalen Hurts is. They were able to get back in, but at the end of the day, it was turnovers. Turnovers decided the game, in my opinion. Dallas had 3 turnovers. And they didn't have any, and so that was, to me, the biggest thing. Dallas last year was able to create a lot of turnovers, certainly with Trayvon Diggs leading the league in interceptions, things like that. And so they weren't able to get the ball away from Philadelphia, and the RPO gave them a lot of problems on third downs. And so whenever Philly was in third and manageable, third and short, they were able to get key first downs with the RPO, and then Dallas also had a couple of penalties that were huge, penalties that you don't need. Parsons with one of the penalties for taunting, things like that. You don't need that when you're trying to get off the field on third down. That's well documented with some of the things that have happened here in Kansas City, and so. Dallas got back to running the ball and leaning on Zeke a little bit, and he started to show some flashes of old and Pollard, and then all of a sudden what looked like was about to be a blowout, 20-0, all of a sudden now is a 20-17 game, and they needed one more play to try to get that momentum fully back on their side. And then you got to tip your hat to the Eagles. They took the ball the length of the field and answered Dallas' score that had made it a 3-point game, and they were able to do that and then secured it with another turnover. But for me, I hope that it puts to end this whole Dak Cooper Rush thing, and Cooper Rush did what you want your backup to do, and he kept it afloat. For me, going into when he was going to start, I just wanted him to be above 500. Can you be 3-2 in those 5 starts?
And he was 4-1.
You can't ask for anything more than that. And they were playing on the road, tough place to play. And he was a little rattled early in the game. He finally settled in. Once the running game settled in, it gave him an opportunity to make some great throws on the boot. But I still felt like he was a little late with the ball. On 2 or 3 occasions, one of them that resulted in an interception. If he gets the ball where it should be, it could have easily been a touchdown, and all of a sudden the game maybe is a little bit different outcome. But, at the end of the day, Philly won the game, and so they were successful, and when they needed to reach back to that offensive line, they were able to do that, and so it's going to make for an interesting rematch in Dallas Christmas Eve.
Oh, there you go. So it'll be national television for that one. Then you got Buffalo and Kansas City. It was a back-and-forth game. I don't think anybody was more than 2 scores ahead of each other. It was back and forth. But just like the Philly and Dallas game, turnovers decided the game. Patrick Mahomes with the RPO, which is run pass option for anybody who does not know what that is. Did the RPO hurt them more than they should? Because they just did not run the ball. And then their 2 losses, they've averaged roughly 65 yards rushing, whereas in the 4 wins, they averaged 125 yards.
You know, one of the things that I always say, that there is a time that Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes can be a little bit too good for their own selves. I think sometimes they don't take what teams are giving them, and sometimes they can be a little bit bullish on their attack. I think both of the interceptions that Mahomes threw were poor choices, but it's what makes him great, the arm talent that he has, and that he can squeeze balls in, and that he can give receivers opportunities on 50-50 balls, things like that, and throwing off your back foot, and it's what makes him great. But it's also in close games what can be your Achilles heel on that, and it came down to who was going to have the ball last. You got to tip your hat to Josh Allen. You know, this guy took a lot of criticism early in his career, and he goes out there and he's 27 of 40 for 320 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then is also their leading rusher. He had 85. He had 32 yards rushing, but it was when he had those rushes and was able to move the chains. To your point, where they didn't, where the Chiefs didn't rush the ball enough, here Devin Singletary had 85 yards rushing in that game.
Absolutely.
And so it kept that game a little bit low-scoring game. I've always said if you're going to beat the Chiefs, that's how you want to beat them, in a 24-20 game. You don't get in a shootout with them. I mean, it's like trying to outshoot the Golden State Warriors in basketball. Just not going to happen. And so those have been the games that over his tenure that Mahomes has struggled in, is those lower-scoring games where he feels like, you know, I've got to press the issue a little bit because they're slowing us down. And so one of the things that Buffalo was able to do is just control the ball, control the clock, and you know, the turnovers at the end of the day are the difference in the game, because one of them took points off the scoreboard.
Absolutely. And just as you said, in their last drive when Buffalo scored the touchdown to take the lead, they're rushing. I mean, Allen hurdled I think it was Justin Reed, but hurdled the guy, and a few runs they made it successful, and then he was able to get that long pass because the rushing was working, whereas Patrick Mahomes was struggling a little bit in his last drive. He felt like he had to throw the ball the whole time. He couldn't run the ball, and so that hurt them and then put him in a position to throw a bad pass, which it was a great defensive player. And you got to realize Buffalo, you know, you say Buffalo was number 1 last year and then they blew it. Well, they were still number 1 this year, and they proved it. They've only given up 7 points. They only gave up 10 points in that second half. So they've only given up 17 points, and one of them is to the team that you are challenging to go to the Super Bowl with.
Absolutely. I think the other thing is how they've constructed their team. And one of the things they wanted to be able to do to beat the Chiefs is be able to get to Mahomes, and the amount of pressure that they were able to do to just get him off center just a little bit, and then Von Miller with 2 huge sacks in the game. That's why they went to get him, just for that. Now, at the end of the day, regular season win is great, but until you do it in the playoffs, there's always going to be this sitting in the back of your head of, until we do it in the playoffs to the Chiefs, then the regular season really doesn't matter.
Absolutely. So we are at halftime on Any Given Sunday. Great show so far. We're rocking it all, as always. So we're going to take a quick break. 816-599-6893 is the phone number. Give us a call and and speak your piece. And so we'll take a break, and we will be back shortly. All right, we are back. Any given Sunday, Coach 24, Darwin Penny, DJ Scatter, George Walker behind the scenes, and I am Brian Kress, the awesome voice. We were just talking about the Chiefs, and yesterday, Travis Kelce restructured his contract. I guess his agent called him and said, would you like to restructure it? And they restructured almost $3.5 million in salary. And usually when that happens, they are looking to bring somebody in. Now, Kansas City is not a type of person that brings in like a Von Miller type guy or a big name guy, but who do you have who possibly could fit that bill?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways that the Chiefs could go. Certainly, there's Odell Beckham Jr., who's out there as a free agent coming off a knee injury in the Super Bowl last February. And so he's going to be looking. There's been much malignment about Kansas City's receiving corps and missing of Tyreek Hill. If you're going to have somebody who's going to be a field stretcher, well, OBJ from a mesh is not a field stretcher anymore. He's more of a possession guy, but he still has some explosion. I think the receiver in Pittsburgh could be looking to do a trade, and because I don't think this is going to be a playoff year for them. This is going to be an opportunity for them maybe to invest in some draft picks. Kansas City has a lot of draft picks because of the Tyreek Hill move to Miami. And so I think if I was a team, I'd be trying to get that. The guy that I think could really fill a void, even though I think he probably fits another team a little better than he does Kansas City, is Christian McCaffrey. I think it's important that they have somebody who's a run pass option. Like I'd trade at least two running backs and a draft pick for McCaffrey to be here in Kansas City. So let's just say Clyde Edwards-Helaire and McKinnon and a draft pick for Christian McCaffrey.
No, that sounds good. I like that idea. The problem is Carolina going to want more draft picks than players themselves? Because if they're looking to revamp their whole team and just totally tear it down and build it up, why would they do it with so-called two running backs, the so-called subpar running backs? And I like CEH, but he is a subpar running back.
Well, he's early in his career, and so if I'm Carolina, I'm still getting the picks, but the picks don't do me any good till next year. I need something that at least gives me an opportunity. So for as bad as they have been, 3-3 is leading their division.
Yeah.
They're not out of it yet.
No. So
if I can get somebody that could give me a little bit of spark now, even and get the draft picks that I'm wanting, why wouldn't I want to do that right now? So as bad as they are right now, if they could just get some quarterback play, their defense is not bad. They've got decent receivers there. They don't have any quarterback play. Now they moved on from one of their receivers, Richie Anderson, and I don't want to go a whole lot into that, but
right.
Look at what that could present for them. Like I said, the Bucks are leading the division at 3-3, so they're not out of the race, totally. And so I think that was a huge move with Kelce being able to restructure. To me, it kind of more than anything solidifies the fact that he'll be around a little bit longer, and you won't have as much money tied up into two positions. In particular, you're going to have one of the highest paid tight ends, and you're going to always have one of the highest paid quarterbacks. And so to be able to get those other pieces that you need, somebody was going to have to be able to do that, and I'm glad it was him.
Yeah, absolutely, because he is a stalwart of this community and of this team, and it would be a travesty to see Travis Kelce go to somewhere else. So to see him doing this, because he's valuing the team too, because a lot of times players don't want to do that because it's hurting their money or however their contract is. So This is a good thing. So, so speaking of this, last week I was 7-7. You were 5-9. Now, I don't know what the NFL Network guys were based on last Thursday night and Monday night because they don't put it down. But Rich Eisen went 7-5. Steve Mariucci went 8-4. Kurt Warner went 5-7. So he was, he I guess tried to get all the upsets and didn't do well. And Michael
I
Irvin
didn't try to get upsets. It was just bad.
Yeah. Now, I will say this, and I am proud to say it. I was the only one out of the 6 people to pick the Giants and the Jets Sunday.
You're awesome.
I know. There you go. There's a reason why I'm called the
For me, there's been no reason to ever pick those two on the same day unless you're bringing Joe Namath back and Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, I totally get that. But Green Bay had just not been playing well, and I just could, and the Jets were, and this was the second time that Green Bay has ever played the New York teams back to back, and one was technically they were both road games, even though the Green Bay was considered a home game in London. But the Jets have just been playing well, and Breece Hall has become a beast.
I think that was what I forgot that game was not at Lambeau with them being the home team, and so I was just like, there's no way the Jets are going to go into Lambeau and win, but it was actually not there. But the Packers have some issues. I think their issues are leadership issues. I think early in spring in camp, when Rodgers threw his young receivers under the bus, I think that's coming back to bite them right now. There's no trust with those guys. Everybody talks about how big a loss Tyreek Hill would be to the Chiefs. Devontae Adams to the Raiders versus being in Green Bay has been huge with Aaron Rodgers and the continuity that those two guys could have, throwing back shoulder passes and those guys knowing where he was going to break. Now Rodgers looks indecisive when he's going to throw the ball. And then surprisingly, they haven't leaned on their running game. They have a good running back in Aaron Jones and a quality backup
in Dillon
and Dillon and A.J. Dillon, and they just refuse. But when you pay, it's what makes the NFL what it is today is when you pay all of this high dollars to these quarterbacks, then you expect them to carry your team when in reality the other team is saying, run the ball. We'll let you run the ball, and we refuse to do it. Teams refuse to do it. And so I think that would take a lot of pressure off of what he's doing. But for me, their biggest issue is leadership, and he needs to be a leader. We know he's an elite thrower of the ball, one of the all-time greats. But right now he needs to lead his team and get them out of the funk that they're in. Call a players-only meeting, do something because it doesn't make any sense right now. And while they're struggling, the Vikings are getting better.
Yep, they are.
And they're going to do it with a guy who's not elite at quarterback, but they're going to lean on their running game with Dalvin Cook, and then they're going to allow Justin Jefferson and Thielen and those guys to make plays. And Kirk Cousins, we know that he can put up yards.
Right.
The question is, what is he going to do in the biggest games? And right now, he's playing well. He's playing with a lot of confidence, and they have a very, very underrated defense. And so I think Green Bay is going to have a hard time winning that division this year. I think the Vikings are going to probably be the class of that division.
Yep, and I did predict that. I did predict that Minnesota would win that division. I just wasn't pleased with Green Bay, and you're totally right. Everybody talks about how bad Kansas City is hurting, losing Tyreek Hill. Green Bay is almost double the hurt of losing Devontae Adams because they just don't have nobody. They could not bring in nobody, and the one guy that he relied on is now gone for the season, or at least gone for at least 4 to 6 weeks. So, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Now, saying that, we were talking earlier that the New Orleans Saints is going to Arizona and playing the Cardinals tonight. Now, Cardinals, Kyler Murray is getting 2 wide receivers back. Well, one he's getting back due to a suspension, and one that they picked up for a draft pick, or actually one was for a 6th round next year pick and a 7th round 2024 pick. So he's got two new toys to play with, as you would say. Hopefully that will help them out, because they were good on the road, and that's why I picked them last week, because I thought maybe that playing on the road they would beat Seattle, and they just couldn't do it. But they struggle at home, and in New Orleans is just as bad right now. They're struggling. I mean, their quarterback controversy, I guess you can say, or whatever, is not working very well either. They're struggling there. So who do you have for tonight?
Well, with it all said, I think that the struggles of the Cardinals, it's like, pick your poison. And I think the Cardinals are at least at home. Certainly getting Hopkins back could be huge. Losing Marquise Brown is big, but they also have got to do something about their running game. I mean, we continue to say this over and over, team after team, with running game, but Kyler Murray is the leading rusher for the Cardinals. James Conner has been banged up all year, and so they're going to go with Eno Benjamin as the lead back and see can he give them a little bit of reprieve so Kyler's not spending all that time running around. But I think teams have made some adjustments to Cliff Kingsbury. He's another one of those college coaches that I was like, how does a guy that doesn't have a winning record in college get an NFL job without any NFL experience? And I really don't want to go into the whole
Right.
You know how I feel about some of these guys.
We have totally discussed this in depth at times.
Guys getting jobs with the system as it is, and so. But I think teams have made adjustments. Kyler's trajectory since he's been in the league is that the first 3 quarters of the season he's been lights out, and then he tends to falter down the latter part. Part of it is because of injuries, and that's what you have to take on when you take a smaller quarterback. Are they going to be able to take the pounding that the NFL brings, and especially when you're asking him to use his legs as much as they do. And so, but they still have enough weapons, I believe, and when you look at New Orleans, Alvin Kamara is not what Alvin Kamara was a few years back. When he was, putting up, Roger Craig-like numbers, right?
Right.
1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving. He was just doing all of those things. And especially when they had a tandem of he and Mark Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
When he's had to become the bell cow, it's been injuries and things like that for a guy who's not a more durable back. He's more of a leaner back. He's just more of a scat back, as I used to call him back in the day.
Right.
Dallas fans, I hope you're listening when all you guys are ready to push Zeke out the door for Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard and Alvin Kamara are very, very similar to be that bell cow, and you're going to ask them to take some of the pressure off your quarterback, because right now they don't have Drew Brees anymore who you can just turn it all over to. And so you're going to need to lean on that running game a little bit more. And Kamara, since he's had to be the lead back, has been banged up time and time again.
And their tight ends are not doing very well. Their wide receivers are not as great. Now you have Olive, who's injured. He's banged up, so he's not 100%. But you had Michael Thomas, who was a stud at the same time Kamara was, and he is struggling too. So you have all that going. How can you have to rely on him, but how much can you rely on him?
Absolutely. This was supposed to be the year that Thomas would be back healthy, coming off that severe knee injury that he had a couple of years ago. And usually the first year back, you're not 100% with when he tore his knee and his ankle up. And so now, but he hadn't been the same player since then. And part of that is adjusting to quarterbacks that coincide where, he and Drew Brees had an unbelievable a rapport with each other, and he was able to get him the ball in space and where he liked the ball. And so now you're trying to deal with Jameis and other quarterbacks, and so it's not the same. And so it's going to be interesting. I think they have a lot of dysfunctional, also Michael Thomas had a lot of success under the leadership of Sean Payton as the head coach. You don't have that anymore.
No.
So there's a whole lot to go along with where they're trying to go as an organization. And so it's a toss-up game for me, but I'm going to give Kyler the edge in the end.
I totally agree. I think it will be a 24-20 game, so Buffalo versus Kansas City. But I think Arizona 24-20. Now, let's talk about college football.
I'm going to go Arizona 28, New Orleans 17.
There we go. 28-17. And you said who?
Arizona.
Arizona. Okay. So now we're college football. Alabama's finally gotten beat. Tennessee has finally stepped up. They nearly lost it, but they stepped up when they needed to, and they are the second team in the East Conference because Georgia is the number one team. So they are one of 9 undefeated teams. You got Georgia at 7-0. You got Tennessee at 6-0. Michigan 7-0. Ohio State 6-0. You have Clemson at 7-0. TCU at 6-0. Mississippi at 7-0. UCLA at 6-0, and Syracuse at a surprising 6-0. So with that, how much of a chance does Tennessee have to overtake Georgia for the shot at playing in the national championship?
Slim and none. Can they pull that off against Georgia? I think Georgia's right now only slightly a step below what they were last year overall as a team. Alabama's still trying to get back to where they were probably 3 years ago. Alabama was very young last year, and so they're what I call a middle-aged team this year, still probably a year away from being really dominant again. But because of how it's structured, the two best teams may not be able to play against each other in the SEC championship game. And so all of a sudden Bama's back in it. But what Bama has to do now, Bama has to run the table if they want to be considered one of the teams for the playoff.
Yep.
They're going to have to – they're not going to be able to do like they did in different years where they could be they could lose the SEC championship game and still be in. This year they don't get to do it. Last year they did it just the opposite. They lost a regular season game but then was able to win the SEC championship game only to lose to Georgia in the NCAA title game. So, it's great for college football to have as many undefeated teams right now. I think part of it is, too, a lot of teams haven't played those big interconference or rivalry games like Alabama going and playing Texas, things like that. Some of these other teams is like, hey, we'll play the Patsy schedule and we'll give you a bunch of money to come play us. But we're not going to take that loss in the season early because we're not an SEC team who's going to have power rankings to overcome. And so obviously we know that one of those teams between Michigan and Ohio State has to lose.
Right, absolutely.
When they face each other. And so I think it's going to make for interesting food for thought. Clemson will control their own destiny in the ACC. I don't really see anybody other than, I think North Carolina could pose a threat to them. Wake Forest is playing really good this year, but again, I don't think they'll really be upset. But North Carolina at 6-1, I think could create a problem for Clemson in the ACC. I don't know that. I mean, TCU got a huge scare. I think that's where we'll see our best rematch of the year will be Oklahoma State and TCU in the Big 12 title game playing against each other. And I think that'll be a great game. It was a great game last week.
Yeah, but Oklahoma State has to get past Oklahoma. And no matter how great Oklahoma State is and how bad Oklahoma is, Oklahoma always seems to find a way to beat them.
Well, they beat Oklahoma last year, and so I just think this is their year where they're heading. They have a senior heavy team. I've followed them really, really close just because I have a cousin who's the starting free safety, Jason Taylor II, for Oklahoma State, and all those guys are mature on that Oklahoma State team. Their quarterback is better, okay, and right now their coach is better. Lincoln Riley's gone,
right,
and so Oklahoma got trounced when they went down to Fort Worth. I mean, they got it handed to them.
Yep, they did.
And so they kind of got back to their winning ways. Sorry, Jayhawk fans. I know you thought you were going undefeated this year, but you're not. He's coming back down to earth. Lawrence is back to normal. But still, you're still only one win away from being bowl eligible.
There you go.
There's hope. Right?
There you go. I hate to say it, but they're closer to it than Missouri is. So
the challenge for Oklahoma State is going to be staying focused when they have to play Texas. They cannot go to sleep and lose that game against Texas.
Right.
They still can get to the Big 12 title game because they're in the North, even if they were to lose to Texas. But any hopes that they would have of trying to sneak into the college football playoff would be out the window. TCU still has to play Texas. Texas is starting to get their feet under them, under Sarkisian, and they've settled in at quarterback. And I think the kid that's a transfer from Ohio State is so they, like I say, they're quietly could be a thorn in both of those teams' backside when it comes to the Big 12.
Absolutely. Well, and we're talking about the SEC. Well, you were talking moving away from the SEC, but to bring up the SEC, usually it is the West Conference dominated. You know, LSU's, Auburn, Alabama, and this year it is Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi, all from the Eastern Conference. So one of them, unless they keep beating each other, is going to challenge for the championship. And I just don't see Georgia. I think really Missouri gave them the scare to let them know, hey, if you play subpar, you just show up, you're not going to win. So but I think Georgia is still the team to beat. Mm-hmm. This is Michigan's best chance to beat Ohio State. I can't remember where they're playing at. If they're playing in Michigan or at the Shoehorn, but either that, I think the winner of that team that game will make it to the playoffs. So,
absolutely, yeah. There's no. I don't see an outside SEC Big 12. I don't see UCLA sneaking in. Maybe they could if they run the table, but I think it's going to still be hard for them to beat SC when that'll come down to that last game of the year. And so it's going to be interesting. I do agree. Michigan, Ohio State,
and it is at Ohio State.
Yeah, it's in Columbus, and so. It should be a big game. Harbaugh has had his problems beating Ohio State.
I think he's had one win against them.
And so what makes me think that this is going to be the year, I'm not buying. So I think the biggest thing is that I think that Ohio State, when you look at them versus Michigan, it's going to be whose quarterback plays better. Does J.J. McCarron play better than C.J. Stroud? Right now, Stroud's having a better year. He's 24 TDs and 3 interceptions versus 9 TDs and 2 interceptions. And so we'll see at where they are.
Absolutely. So we've had a great show so far, but the best segment of our show is coming up right now with Penny for Your Thoughts.
With Penny for Your Thoughts today, I want to talk about the impact that Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, has had not only on historically black colleges and universities when it comes to NCAA football, but the NCAA as a whole. Right now, they are one of the most talked about teams, Jackson State, in all of college football. What he was been able to do there has been nothing short of a miracle. And we're not talking about just them having an undefeated season, but even being able to coach his sons and them talking about Shedeur Sanders actually being in the conversation for the Heisman. When was the last time a historically black college and university had a player that was being considered for the Heisman?
Was that Steve McNair?
You have to go all the way back to Steve McNair. Back in 1995 for that. And so he's had a huge impact on not only what they've done on the field, but what they've been able to do off the field and bringing these young men. He's turned the whole recruiting game upside down and being able to land the number one recruit in the nation in Travis Hunter there at Jackson State. And then there was a lineman this year who was ranked as the number one lineman. Can you imagine this lineman made his final two choices between Alabama and Jackson State?
And normally Jackson State wouldn't even
But he's been able to create facilities there. He's been able to create a community there, the city of Jackson, Mississippi, and how they've rallied around Coach Prime. And so my hat is off to him, to whatever he's been able to do to bring attention to historically black college and university football. And then now the conversation is around, will he stay or will he go to a Power Five? Because there's a magnetism about Deion, and it always has when he was a player, both at Florida State and at and with in the NFL, and then certainly what he was able to do. Last week marked the anniversary of when he was the guy who played in an NFL game, got in a plane, and then played in a World playoff game for the Atlanta Braves. In the same day, and so that's incredible to think about, and what Coach Prime is doing at Jackson State, it's incredible again. So my hat's off to you, Deion. Continue to bring attention to what's going on in HBCU football.
What a way to end a great show. So, all right, we're getting off here. Mr. George Walker, GJ Scatter, he will exit us. And with Coach 24, Darwin Penny, and Brian Kress, the awesome voice, be awesome, not angry, and you guys have yourself a great football weekend.